What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be doing a little history lesson here. We're going to be learning about the top 15 deadliest plane crashes in history. Starting from the least deadliest plane crash to one you've probably heard about, claiming thousands of lives. One of the plane crashes I've even investigated, and we will talk about that for sure. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to get right into it. If you're a kid, this is a good history lesson. Pay attention in school because you will probably learn about these in history class, because these are very historical events and they did happen and they are very important. So you'll probably learn more from me than you will in school anyway. So enough yapping. Let's get into it. Kicking things off will be number 15, which will be the Trans World Airlines Flight 800, also known as the TWA Flight 800. Trans World Flight 800, also known as TWA Flight 800, was a Boeing 747 flight heading from New York to Rome with a stop in London, carrying 230 passengers, most of the people on a school field trip. And it was a very evening flight. About 7:30, the plane soared down the runway and lifted into the air, but the people didn't know that this was about to be their worst nightmare come true. The plane took right off into the air and started flying over the sea. 15 minutes into takeoff, it caught fire. They heard an explosion. The plane started catching on fire. The plane broke apart midair. The cockpit fell off, and the plane just shattered and burned. And then it crashed into the ocean. Out of all the people on board, no one survived. And later they did some investigations that there was something wrong with the gas chambers. Not the gas chambers. Why? I cannot think straight today. There was something wrong with the fuselage, with the tubes that connect to the engines and the tanks. There was something wrong with those. The tubes were leaking oil, and then the oil got to the tanks and exploded. So that goes down. So now they know to check the oil. Number 14. American Airlines Flight 587. American Airlines Flight 587 was an Airbus A300 heading from Miami, Florida to the Bahamas. There was major turbulence that happened. When the plane got to the turbulence, the fin started shaking. The stabilizer started shaking, the fin started shaking, and then the fin came off. Everybody was waiting for their dream vacation in the Bahamas. Then the fin came off, and the plane started to go downwards, and it crashed into a neighborhood. And of all people on board, no one survived. And now they know that they need to watch out for the turbulence, and they need to stay out of those waves, because some little wind like that can definitely do some damage. Number 13. Korean Air Flight 7. Korean Air Flight 7 was a flight heading from JFK to Seoul, South Korea, carrying 269 passengers. The plane autopilot went wrong, and the plane flew into a war zone. And then the Soviets thought that it was a bomber, thought it was like some sort of bomber or fighter, or thought it was a spy plane, but it was really just a Boeing 747 commercial plane. The plane lifted into the air. The plane was flying over, then a fighter jet came on and started circling the plane. The Soviets shot it down, and the plane landed into the ocean. And out of all the people on board, no one survived. And now they knew not to fly into a war zone, because The Soviets were forced to shoot that down because they thought their leader did not think that it was a commercial plane. Number 12, Air France Flight 4590. Air France Flight 4590 was a flight heading was a Concorde, a flight heading from Paris to London, carrying 113 passengers. The plane lifted off into the air. Well, before that, the plane started fire before it lifted off into the air. The rubber from the tires got caught and tore up. Then the plane started burning. It lifted up into the air, but for some reason, the pilots, instead of landing it, they decided to keep it going up higher. Then the plane stalled out and crashed into a nearby school. And out of all the people on board, everybody lost their lives. And now they know to check the concrete, not the wheels, before they take off. Number 11. This one was hijacked by the same group of terrorists that another crash was hijacked by. That happened later and that we will talk about in this video. Number 11. Pan Am Flight 103. Pan Am Flight 103 was a Boeing 747 heading home with a whole bunch of people getting ready to go for the holidays, on a sweet vacation for the holidays. It was heading from London Heathrow to Detroit, Michigan, with a stop in JFK. The plane was getting loaded, but they didn't realize that a group of terrorists called Al-Qaeda planted a bomb on the plane set to go off 30 minutes into the flight. The plane took off, flying over the sea. And all of a sudden, once it got over to a town of Lockerbie, no one expected it. It exploded. The Boeing 747 exploded, debris raining down into Lockerbie. The nose of the plane crashing right into the middle of the town, killing all 270 people on board and a few on the ground. It was like a meteor falling from the sky. The whole town just burned down. And they didn't realize that it was hijacked until they were looking at the repairs and they found the bomb. They found the device that triggered the bomb. And this goes down to be one of the deadliest hijacked planes in history. Number 10, United Airlines Flight 232. United Airlines Flight 232 was a flight heading from Dallas-Fort Worth to Chicago, carrying a lot of people. When the plane started to land in Chicago, something went wrong with the engine. The tail engine shorted out due to a broken fan blade that was investigated. The pilots tried to land it, but they lost control. The plane was so unbalanced that it landed right into the field. That crashed right into a field. And out of all the people on board, sadly, 112 lost their lives. But 184 survived. And they later realized the crack in the blade that was there that caused the tail engine to spark. Number 9, Delta Airlines Flight 4819. Delta Airlines Flight 4819 was a CRJ 900 heading from Minneapolis all the way to Toronto. The flight carrying a lot of people on board. It was a very cold day. When the plane was on its descent, it went right through a major snowstorm. It finally got out of the snowstorm, but the ice on the runway was very slippery. And because of how slippery it was, the wheels did not have a chance. The plane lifted off and turned upside down. Even the wings came off. The plane landed upside down. And because the plane there was so much ice on the run, the plane landed upside down and just sat there on the runway. And out of all the people on board, 21 sadly lost their lives. But 55 survived. Only a few with major injuries. And now they know that they need to have the run that they need to not use a runway when it's that covered in ice. But this doesn't go down to be one of the, this does but there's this next one goes even down to be deadlier than that. It's another CRJ and it goes down to be much deadlier than this. Number 8. American Airlines Flight 5342. American Airlines Flight 5342 was a CRJ 700 heading from Kansas City, Missouri to Washington, D.C. When the plane was on its descent, it was at night. 9:03 p.m. is when all the tragic happened. There was a Black Hawk U.S. Army helicopter that was in the way. Yep. It didn't pay attention. Air traffic controllers tried to warn the Black Hawk helicopter. They wouldn't listen. The CRJ tried to warn the Black Hawk helicopter that was coming in for a landing. It wouldn't listen. Just like 1 mile out from the airport, right over the river, is when it all happened. 9:03 p.m. The CRJ, the American Airlines CRJ, smashed right into the Black Hawk. This actually goes down to be the deadliest mid-air collision in history. And it was obviously the Black Hawk's fault because they did not pay attention at all to the landing CRJ. And then out of all the people on board, everybody lost their lives. Debris from both planes and from both the plane and the helicopter were raining from the sky into the river. And that plane was so close to landing, and the Black Hawk had to ruin it. This actually goes down to be one of the worst American Airlines crashes in history, and the worst helicopter crash in history. Number 7. Japan Airlines Flight 123. Japan Airlines Flight 123 was a Boeing 747 heading from Tokyo to Beijing. The plane took off, and everything seemed normal until the tail of the plane ripped off. The plane had no control without the tail. That it kept swinging side to side and side to side. The pilots tried to land the plane, but they couldn't find a safe space to land it because there was a mountain in the way, so they tried to land it on the mountain. Then the plane caught on fire, and it crashed onto the mountain. Now, out of all the people on board, 520 lost their lives. But 4 survived, but they all had major injuries. And now they know that they need to take better looks at the tail for something like that to happen again. That way something like that never happens again. And they also need... And there's also a memorial over at that area where the plane crashed, so that way they could see all who died. And this goes down to be definitely one of the deadliest Boeing 747 crashes in history. Number 6. China Airlines Flight 611. China Airlines Flight 611 was a Boeing 747 heading from Hong Kong to Beijing. A very short, kind of a short flight. A very domestic flight. As the plane took off over the China Sea, they didn't realize that something that happened to this plane 20 years ago would happen again. There was improper repairments from 20 years ago when it did a horrible landing. Then the plane started to break up. When it hit turbulence, it just broke up. Shattered up and smashed right into the China Sea. And out of all the people on board, no one survived. And now they know that they need to repair the planes before they always repair the planes before they take back off. Number 5. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was a Boeing 777, the safest of all commercial planes, heading from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. And it was a flight at night, too. And not a lot of people know what really happened to it, but I actually found it out because I put so many pieces of the puzzle together that I found out what happened to this flight. As the plane took off, all the people were getting ready to go to sleep and they were expecting to be landed in Beijing by the morning. The plane, for some reason, not a lot of people know this, I'm the only one that knows this, but autopilot went wrong. Very wrong. Autopilot went very wrong when it took off. It started going the opposite way. And then it started turning weird directions. Many people thought those turns were man-made, but they were actually autopilot. The pilots didn't realize it. The last words on the plane were, "Good night, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. The plane, still flying, and it kept climbing too. It got up to 65,000 feet. Way too high for a commercial plane. And it kept flying till it ran out of fuel. It flew over the Malaysia Peninsula. And then it went over by Vietnam. And all of a sudden, it vanished from radar sight. It just vanished from radar. No one could see where it went. It just vanished from radar. And fun fact, this happened in 2014. And I was actually almost on that flight. Thank goodness I wasn't, though. The plane started. Then all of a sudden, now back to the plane story. Now all of a sudden, the plane ran out of fuel. Because it was so high up, pilots were asleep for some reason. Plane ran out of fuel. All of a sudden, it did a nosedive towards the ground. And sadly, all those people that were sleeping never woke up. They never woke up. All 239 never woke up. And they all died. Basically, and then all of a sudden, now back to the plane story. Nose dive right into the ground. It was going down fast. The wings tore off. Lots of the parts of the plane were tearing off because of how fast it was going down from 60,000 feet. And then it slammed into the ocean. Tearing into a million and billions and billions of tiny pieces. I actually have a piece from that plane because it washed up to me on shore. And I could tell it was from that plane because of the colors. And then all of a sudden, the tail was actually still there. Still in proper condition, though. But then all of a sudden off the coast of Africa, pieces started washing up on shore. And then they found the tail, and they were like, that has to be the Malaysia Airlines flight. like I did when I found that piece. That had to be the Malaysia Airlines flight. And lots of, well, not people, but AI. There's AI submarines and boats out there right now looking for the plane, the whole body of the plane. But here's the thing: the whole body of the plane got destroyed, and because they need to check their autopilot because of how wrong that went. That definitely went wrong. Their autopilot went wrong. Now, alright, I'm gonna have to move on to the next one, though, because, I could spend a whole video talking about this flight, but I have to move on to the next one. I can't talk about this flight all day, even though I know all about it. This one's a little hard to explain, though, but I'll do my best. Number 4, Air India Flight 182. Air India Flight 182 was a Boeing 747 going from Montreal to Mexico City, carrying 329 passengers. When the plane got to a cruising altitude, all of a sudden, a hijacker from the plane threw a bomb on the plane, and then the plane shattered. And out of all the people on board, everybody lost their lives. Very tragic event. And there's not really a lot to talk about this one, so yeah, there's not really a lot to talk about this one, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Number 3, this was the deadliest Boeing 747 crash in history that involved 747s. Tenerife Airport disaster. The Tenerife Airport disaster was a flight between KLM and Pan Am. It was a very, very, very foggy day. KLM was ready to take off to its destination. It got to the runway, went full speed down the runway. Then all of a sudden, when it was still going speed, there was a strange thing in the runway. It was a Pan Am flight. Pan Am Boeing 747. Sitting there. The plane tried to take off to go over it, but it couldn't take off in time. And then it crashed then as it finally was able to take off, it crashed into the top of the Pan Am plane. Now, out of all the people on board, 583 lost their lives. And all the people on the KLM flight lost their lives. But 61 survived, and they were all on the Pan Am flight. But many with minor and major injuries. Yeah, that definitely goes down to be one of the worst plane crashes in history. For sure. Now they know not to fly in fog. They have to be way better about flying in foggy conditions on the runways. About taking off in foggy conditions on the runways. Number 2, American Airlines Flight 191. American Airlines Flight 191 was a DC-10, and keep in mind, this is the deadliest DC-10 crash in the world. Before another plane crash that we're going to talk about next, this was actually the deadliest of all. This was actually the deadliest one in America before that happened, before the next one happened. It was a flight heading from Chicago to Los Angeles. The plane took off on the runway, but the engine didn't feel right. One of the wing engines took off, just flew right off. And the plane was able to stay in the air. The pilots tried to do a turnaround and land it, but it was so unbalanced that it couldn't work. Then all of a sudden, the plane smashed into the tarmac. And out of all the people on board, everybody lost their lives. Instantly, too. And that goes down. And now they realized that there was definitely something wrong with the engine of the plane. And now they need to check their engine's better because that one wasn't bolted on all the way. Now, next one is one that I said I would talk about. That I said I would talk about a million times. This next one's something you've definitely heard, probably most likely heard of, and the most offensive. So I'm going to be very careful with this one. And please do not joke about any of these in public before I move forward, especially this next one, because it is very offensive. Let's just say to Americans, it is very offensive. Very offensive to Americans. Anybody who lives in the United States, it is very offensive to them. This next one is by far the deadliest in history. Number 1. We're ready. 9/11 attacks. On September 11th, 2001, there were 4 planes that were used for normal flights. And let's just abbreviate this. Out of every single thing, all these plane crashes together, thousands and thousands of people died. 10,000 plus people died. And it was caused by the same group of terrorists that put a bomb on Pan Am 103. And they planned it again. They planned to take out something. They planned to attack America. And that's the reason why America went to war with them. That's the reason why they went to war with the Taliban. But we're not going to talk about that in this video. So, the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11. American Airlines Flight 11 was a Boeing 767 flight from Boston to Los Angeles. It was a very early morning flight. The plane took off. But there were hijackers. Okay, so back then, airports, believe it or not, didn't have security. Airports in the United States didn't have security. You were basically free to do whatever you want. Like, airports in the United States did not have security at all. And you were allowed to go into the cockpit. You were allowed to go into the cockpit during the flight. You were allowed to, help fly the plane. You were allowed to talk to the pilots while you're flying. You were allowed to do a lot of stuff. But until this happened, until these tragic disasters happened, until this happened, now you're not allowed to do that anymore. Now they have major security. Yeah, until 9/11 happened, now you're not allowed to do that anymore. You're not allowed to go into the cockpit. You have to go through security. And it's major security, too. It's major security. And the cockpit door is locked on the flights now. But anyway, back to the story. It was an American Airlines Flight 11. When the plane got to its cruising altitude, the hijackers brought weapons on the plane, went into the cockpit, and killed the pilots. But they went into the cockpit and killed the pilots. And then they turned the plane around toward a different direction. And then they announced the plane had been hijacked, and everybody was able to make their last call to their loved ones. And then, 8:46 a.m., the plane smashed into the North Tower, killing thousands of people, killing 3,000 people, even including people in the tower. And most of those people were going on vacation, on a nice vacation, until that happened. And then when many people thought it was just a plane accident or miscommunication, until this one. United Airlines Flight 175 joined in. United Airlines Flight 75 was one going the same exact route, leaving a little bit later. going from Boston to Los Angeles. The plane took off, and again, once it got into the air, once they were investigating what happened to that plane, to the American Airlines plane, the hijackers killed the pilots and turned the plane around. And then, while they were trying to get the news people were trying to get good footage of the tower, they see another plane flying towards the other tower. Everybody on board was able to make a call to their loved ones and tell them about that there's nothing right with this plane. The plane, at 9:03 a.m., the United Airlines Flight 175, the Boeing 767, smashed into the South Tower, killing thousands of lives. And now both the towers were knocked down. And before we go any further, this is not something to joke about. I'm doing a video on this because it's a history lesson. I'm trying to honor those people and show them respect. This is not something to joke about. And then after that plane happened, after the second plane, they literally said all planes land immediately, and they closed all airports immediately. So for 3 days straight, there were literally no helicopters or anything. Like, they had to land all planes immediately because of that. Like, they literally had to land all planes immediately. Like, it was that serious because they knew it was not an accident. Yeah, they knew that was some type of attack. And while they were investigating that flight, American Airlines Flight 77. American Airlines Flight 77 happened. American Airlines Flight 77 was a flight heading from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. Once the plane got into the air, the hijackers once again made their move. Stormed into the cockpit. They actually killed a flight attendant as well, and a passenger. They stormed their way into the cockpit, got control of the plane, and turned it around. But they knew that there was the passengers didn't know, because before they didn't hear about the other two. So as the plane was starting, then the plane smashed into the Pentagon. This plane smashed into the Pentagon, killing thousands of lives. Mom, get outside. Killing thousands of lives. And there's a memorial at the Pentagon from this crash at this exact spot. Now, last up, United Airlines Flight 93. United Airlines Flight 93 was a flight heading from New York to Miami. And this one didn't actually make its journey. The hijackers made their move into this one. And once they took control of the cockpit, the passengers knew what's up. They knew what was happening. The passengers and the flight attendants got together, and they made a plan to stop the hijackers. This plane was intended for the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. But because they heard about the other three planes, the passengers got up and started to fight. Tried to fight the hijackers. Hijackers couldn't do anything to turn them off. They even tried doing crazy turns and making turbulence to throw them off, but that did not happen. But they did not throw them off. They were storming the cockpit, and they literally even killed the hijackers. They killed both of them. They killed both the hijackers. And sadly, it crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Sadly, it still crashed. But their bravery, but the fact they were able to sacrifice their lives for the nation's capital is very, very honoring or honorable to America. That they literally sacrificed their lives to save the capital. And there is a special memorial at that field built for them. And again, these are not planes to joke about. These are not stuff to joke about. Especially the attacks. It's not something to joke about. You can get in serious trouble. It's not funny, it's very disrespectful, very racist, very offensive. So now we're going to review all of them. We're going to review, alright, Trans World Flight 800, American Airlines, alright, number 15, we got Trans World Flight 800, 14, American Airlines Flight 587, 13, Korean Air Flight 7, 12, Air France Flight 4590, 11, Pan Am Flight 103, 10, United Airlines Flight 232, 9, Delta Airlines Flight 4819, 8, American Airlines Flight 5342, 7, Japan Airlines Flight 123, 6, China Airlines Flight 611, 5, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, 4, Air India Flight 182, 3, Tenerife Airport disaster between KLM and Pan Am, 2, American Airlines Flight 191, 1, 9/11 attacks. That were also, I forgot to say this, they were also caused by Al Qaeda, the same group that put a bomb in Pan Am 103. American Airlines Flight 11, first one. United Airlines Flight 175, second one. There was both of these were Boeing 757s, by the way. American Airlines Flight 77, then United Airlines Flight 93. Again, these are not something to joke about at all. R.I.P. to all those who died. And thank you for watching this video. And again, if you're in school, please pay attention. Because if you're in history class, you're probably going to be learning about these, especially the attacks. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure to subscribe down below for some more content. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.